The meeting lasted 8 minutes before the executive said they were done. Unmarketable, too unconventional, not what the label was looking for. He had said this to 100 bands. He was right about 99 of them. He closed his folder. He looked across the table. Eddie Van Halen had not moved. He said, "Can I play you something?" The executive said he had another meeting. Eddie said it would take 4 minutes. The executive looked at his watch. He said, 4 minutes. What came out of that guitar in the next 4 minutes meant the executive canceled the next meeting, the meeting after that, and the dinner he had scheduled at 7. It was a Wednesday afternoon in February 1975, and the offices of Monarch Records occupied the 5th and 6th floors of a building on Sunset Boulevard that had been built in 1962 and had the specific institutional weight of a place that has been making decisions about music for long enough that the decisions feel inevitable rather than made. The carpets were thick and dark, the kind that absorb sound and footsteps and the particular tension of people walking toward meetings they have prepared for. The framed gold records on the walls were real, not reproductions, not decorative, but actual certified gold records from actual certified sales, hung in a specific order that anyone who worked on the 6th floor could recite from memory. The receptionist who sat at the desk outside the conference room had been there for 9 years and greeted everyone who came through with the same quality of measured warmth, calibrated precisely to communicate welcome without commitment. The conference room on the 6th floor had a view of the Strip that on clear days extended to the hills, and on this particular Wednesday, the sky was clear enough that the hills were visible, pale and distant through the window behind the executive's chair, a view that Gordon Hale had stopped seeing years ago in the way that people stop seeing the things that are always there. The executive was a man named Gordon Hale. He was 44 years old and had been in the music industry since 1959. 16 years of A&R work, first as an assistant, then as a junior executive, then as the man whose name was on the door of the 6th floor conference room and whose signature appeared at the bottom of the contracts that changed careers. He had signed 11 acts in those 16 years. 7 of them had charted. 3 of them had gone platinum. 1 of them had become a household name. His record was, by any industry measure, exceptional. He had also passed on 43 acts in those 16 years. He did not keep a list of the passes. That was not how the industry worked. And sentimentality about missed opportunities was a luxury that people who had not signed platinum records could afford more easily than people who had. He kept his attention on what he had signed and where it was going, and he trusted the instinct that had produced 7 charting acts in 16 years to tell him reliably when something was not worth pursuing. Van Halen had been brought to his attention by a junior A&R representative named Phil Cassidy, who had seen the band play at a club in the Valley and had come back sufficiently impressed to request a formal meeting. Hale had agreed to the meeting as a professional courtesy. Phil had good ears, and good ears deserved the respect of a hearing. He had not listened to a demo before the meeting because there was no demo. The band had recorded nothing formally. They were bringing themselves. They arrived at 2 in the afternoon, 4 young men in jeans and plain shirts carrying instrument cases, moving through the 6th floor lobby with the contained energy of people who understand that this meeting is important and are managing that understanding carefully. Hale met them in the conference room. He shook hands. He sat down across the table from the 4 of them, opened his folder, and began. He asked about their draw. How many people were they pulling in the clubs? What was the radius of their following? Was it growing or had it plateaued? The bassist answered some of this. The vocalist answered some of it. The guitarist, dark-haired, early 20s, sitting at the end of the table with an instrument case on the floor beside his chair, said almost nothing. He was paying attention. Hale noticed this but did not assign it weight in either direction. He asked about influences, about musical direction, about what the band saw itself becoming in the commercial landscape of 1975. The vocalist was articulate and energetic. The answers were enthusiastic. Hale listened with the practiced attention of someone who has heard enthusiasm many times and has learned to filter it for the specific content that enthusiasm sometimes contains and sometimes doesn't. At the 8-minute mark, he had what he needed. He closed his folder. Not dramatically, the closing of a folder in a meeting is a gesture that can be performed dramatically or administratively, and Hale performed it administratively, the way a man closes a folder when he is finished with its contents and is moving to the conclusion of the meeting. He said, "I appreciate you coming in. I've listened carefully to what you've described, and I want to be direct with you, because I think directness serves everyone better than ambiguity in this situation." He looked at the four of them in turn, briefly, the practiced eye contact of someone who has delivered assessments before and has learned to distribute it equitably. What you're describing, the sound, the approach, the direction, is not what the market is asking for right now. We're in a period where the labels are consolidating around proven formats. What you're bringing is unconventional in ways that I don't see a commercial path for. It's not a judgment on the music, it's a judgment on the market, and the market is where we operate. He reached for the cap of his pen. "I don't think Monarch is the right home for Van Halen at this point in time," he said. "I wish you the best." He looked across the table. The vocalist was processing, the drummer was looking at the table. The bassist was looking at Hale with the expression of someone who has heard a door close and is calculating the distance to the next door. Eddie Van Halen had not moved. He was sitting in the same position he had been sitting in for 8 minutes, slightly forward, forearms on the table, hands loose. He had not leaned back when the folder closed. He had not changed his expression. He was looking at Gordon Hale with the specific quality of attention that Hale had noticed at the beginning of the meeting and was noticing again now, in a different context. He said, "Can I play you something?" Hale looked at him. The question was not aggressive. It was not desperate. It had the tone of a completely reasonable request, the tone of someone who believes they have something to contribute and is asking permission to contribute it, not demanding it. "I have another meeting at 2:30, Hale said. "It'll take 4 minutes, Eddie said. Hale looked at his watch. It was 2:17. He had 13 minutes before the 2:30 meeting, which was with a band whose demo he had already heard and whose contract was already being drafted, and which did not, in any practical sense, require his physical presence in a conference room so much as his signature on a document that his assistant could bring him anywhere. He looked at the watch. He said, 4 minutes. Eddie reached down and opened the instrument case beside his chair. He took out the guitar, a modified instrument, battered and marked with the evidence of years of daily use, the kind of guitar that has been played until it has become the specific expression of one person's relationship with the instrument rather than a general-purpose object. He did not ask for an amplifier. There was no amplifier in the conference room. He held the guitar across his knee and looked at Gordon Hale for exactly 1 second. Then he played. What happened in the conference room on the 6th floor of the Monarch Records building on Sunset Boulevard between 2:17 and 2:21 on a Wednesday afternoon in February 1975 was something that 3 of the 4 other people in the room would spend the following decades describing to people who asked about it, with the consistent acknowledgement that the descriptions were insufficient, that the thing itself had a quality that descriptions approached without reaching. The way you can describe a color to someone who has never seen it and convey the concept without conveying the experience. It was not loud. An unamplified electric guitar in a carpeted conference room produces a sound that is intimate rather than commanding. Thin at the top, dry in the mid-range, the instrument's full character compressed into the acoustic output that exists before amplification gives it the room to become what it is designed to be. Most electric guitar players, heard unamplified, sound diminished. The separation between the instrument and its amplified self reveals the gap between the tool and the user. Eddie Van Halen, heard unamplified in a conference room on the 6th floor of a building on Sunset Boulevard, did not sound diminished. He sounded like what he was, which was someone for whom the amplifier was not the source of the music, but the vehicle for it. Someone whose relationship with the instrument existed prior to and independent of the equipment that projected it. The conference room carpet absorbed the high end. The thick walls kept the sustain from developing fully. None of it mattered. What came through was the logic of the playing, the internal structure, the way one phrase implied the next, the specific quality of decision-making that distinguishes someone who is navigating from someone who is wandering. Gordon Hale heard it from 4 feet away, across a conference table. He had 16 years of music industry experience. He had heard 1,000 demos and attended 100 showcases and sat in enough studio control rooms to have developed a precise understanding of the relationship between recorded sound and live sound and the specific way that each of them communicated what an artist was capable of. He had formed accurate assessments in all of those contexts, and the assessments had produced a record that any executive in any building on Sunset Boulevard would have been proud to claim. He sat in the conference room and listened to 4 minutes and 12 seconds of Eddie Van Halen playing an unamplified guitar 12 feet from a window overlooking the Strip, and he understood, within the first 30 seconds, that the folder he had closed at the 8-minute mark had been closed on information that was incomplete. Not wrong, exactly. The market analysis was accurate. The commercial landscape of 1975 was what he had described it to be. The path he had said he couldn't see was genuinely difficult to see. But the thing he had said he couldn't see a path for was this, specifically this, 4 minutes and 12 seconds of this. And the distance between not seeing a path for something and encountering the thing itself was in this moment the distance between everything he had said in the previous 8 minutes and the silence in the room after the last note. When Eddie finished, the room was quiet. Phil Cassidy, the junior A&R representative who had arranged the meeting and had been sitting in the corner of the conference room with the careful body language of someone who knows their professional standing is partially contingent on the outcome of the next hour, exhaled. One of the other label employees had uncrossed his arms at some point during the 4 minutes. He did not remember doing it. Gordon Hale set his pen down on the table. He said, "Play it again." Eddie played it again. Hale canceled the 2:30 meeting by having his assistant knock on the conference room door and pass him a note, which he read and then set aside. He canceled the meeting after that by the same method. The dinner at 7 he canceled by phone from the conference room at 6:45 when it became clear that the conversation that had started at 2:17 was not finished. The conversation that had started at 2:17 was about Van Halen signing with Monarch Records. It did not produce a signed contract that afternoon. Contracts required lawyers and negotiation and time that a Wednesday conference room on the 6th floor could not compress. But it produced a handshake, which in the music industry of 1975 was the beginning of the thing that the contract would eventually formalize. Van Halen did not sign with Monarch Records. The negotiation that followed the Wednesday handshake produced disagreements about terms that neither side was willing to resolve in the other's favor, and the conversation ended without a deal 18 days later. They signed with Warner Brothers 2 years after that, in 1977, under terms that Phil Cassidy, who had moved to Warner by then, helped negotiate. Gordon Hale heard the debut album in February 1978. He listened to it in his office on the 6th floor on a Thursday morning with the door closed. When it finished, he sat for a few minutes without turning the player off in the quiet of the tape running out. He thought about 4 minutes and 12 seconds. He thought about the folder he had closed at the 8-minute mark and the watch he had looked at 2:17 and the word he had used, unmarketable, and what the word had meant when he said it, and what it meant now in February 1978. Listening to 2 million copies of Unmarketable selling itself. He had been right about the market. The market of 1975 was not ready for Van Halen, and he had read that market accurately, and reading markets accurately was his job. He had been wrong about what to do with the 4 minutes. The 4 minutes were not a market question. The 4 minutes were a different question entirely, and he had answered it correctly. He had said yes, he had listened, he had said play it again. But he had arrived at the yes through the logic of a man looking at his watch, rather than the logic of a man who understood what was being offered. The distinction mattered to him. It mattered in the way that distinctions matter when you are the kind of person who takes their work seriously enough to understand where the reasoning went. He kept the meeting notes from that Wednesday. Not as a document of a missed opportunity. The deal had fallen apart for contractual reasons that had nothing to do with his assessment of the music. He kept them as a reminder of the 8 minutes and what they had contained, and of the 4 minutes and what they had contained, and of the distance between those two things measured in the width of a conference table on a Wednesday afternoon in February 1975. Some decisions get made before the information arrives. The only question is whether you're willing to let the information change them. Gordon Hale was. He had said 4 minutes. He had listened. He had said, play it again. That was the part he kept. Was there a moment when you changed your mind about something important? And what made you change it? Tell us in the comments.